Just a little bit about me. I am a urologist, and for the past 4 years, I've been a medical officer and now the clinical deputy office director in the Office of Gastrorenal, OBGYN, General Hospital, and Urology Devices in the Center for Devices and Radiological Health at the FDA. Our office regulates and reviews all prospective and current urology medical devices. And I was asked to speak about incorporating patient preference perspectives for novel prostate cancer therapies. So briefly, by means of outline, I'll touch for just a moment on the FDA's perspective on patient preference information, and then talk about our current patient preference information, or PPI, study that's ongoing that's relevant to urology. I'll discuss the overview of the study, some proposed outcomes, the expected impact, and also some challenges and lessons learned to this point. So to start, we recognize that patients and their caregivers have very important insights into their disease and to the therapies that are available for those disease. And in 2016, we recognized this by making partnering with patients one of our strategic priorities, and that we believe that if we're to successfully achieve our mission and vision in the service of patients, we have to interact with patients as partners and work together to advance the development and evaluation of innovative technologies. So in concert with that, in 2016, we released a final draft of a guidance. A guidance is the FDA's thinking on a subject. It's not binding, but it kind of reflects how we think about a certain topic. And with regard to patient preference information, this guidance had 4 major objectives. First, to encourage the voluntary submission of PPI by sponsors or other stakeholders, and to aid in our decision-making at the FDA. Secondly, to recommend qualities of PPI, which may result in valid scientific evidence that the agency could then use in its decisions. Third, to provide recommendations for collecting and submitting that information to the agency. And finally, to discuss our inclusion of this information in our decision summaries and provide recommendations for the inclusion of this information in device labeling. So with this as background, I want to talk about our current PPI project that's relevant to us here today. Certainly, I don't need to spend any time with this audience talking about currently indicated treatment for prostate cancer. Dr. Gill astutely and eloquently identified that we haven't had new device-based, and I'm going to stick to devices as I'm from the Center for Devices, but we haven't had any new device-based, innovative, novel prostate cancer therapies that are indicated for the treatment of prostate cancer in over 40 years. Now, we did allow to market the high-intensity focused ultrasound devices, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But certainly, as is evidenced by this very conference and this symposium, that the trend towards focal therapies is evident in a desire to minimize morbidity of treatment and to maintain effective oncologic outcomes. So HIFU is not indicated by the FDA here in the United States for treatment of prostate cancer. It is indicated as a prostate ablation tool to ablate prostate tissue, and the agency has stayed silent as to whether that tissue is either benign or malignant. But based upon the information that we received, which was prostate biopsy data, PSA, and prostate volume data for these devices, there's a challenge in that the understanding of the benefit and risk balance continues to evolve in patients who get their prostate cancer ablated, such that the adverse event profile is known, but there are increasing but relatively few studies with data on the oncological outcomes, especially here in the United States. So patients, regulators, and other stakeholders have to make decisions regarding HIFU with comparatively less relevant clinical effectiveness data than other well-established therapies, but in light of known adverse events and 12-month post-treatment prostate biopsy data. So from the very beginning when these devices came to market, we at the FDA, along with other stakeholders, felt that this was an area whereby patient preference information could be quite valuable, and such that the patient perspective on the available benefit data and/or tolerance of risks associated with HIFU and ablation devices in general may inform future pre-market device evaluation and design of ablation tools in clinical trials. Specifically, we were interested in identifying the tolerance that patients had for adverse events associated with these devices for a given minimal acceptable benefit. We feel that this information can help in the delivery of better ablation devices and the design of clinical trials for these devices sooner for patients, and drive innovation and get us to those novel therapies that to this point have eluded us. So our study overview, basically, the target population are men who have been diagnosed with organ-confined or localized Gleason 6 or 7 prostate cancer who have not undergone any definitive prostate cancer treatment. Men on active surveillance are included and are allowed to participate in the trial. Unlike NIH, we are not a research institute and we don't have any direct patient care responsibilities, so we have to rely on recruitment centers for patients to participate in these trials. And to this point, we've identified 7, soon to be 8, academic medical centers to help refer patients to us to participate in the study. We've identified the knowledge gap that there really is no viable or credible patient preference information data specifically related to these devices. And so the overview of the study involves the development of what's called a discrete choice experiment, and our health economy fellows and staff have helped really devise this. And I'll talk about what a discrete choice experiment is in just a moment. But we identified the attributes from the data that the FDA was able to review for these devices and from the literature. We then received input from across the FDA, including the Center for Devices, the Office of the Commissioner, and the Oncology Center of Excellence. And we've already developed a survey and programmed it into Qualtrics, which is a web-based platform so that the survey can be administered remotely. We've actually pre-tested and validated the instrument, and the online administration of the survey via email is ongoing. And this is an example of a discrete choice experiment. You can see the patient is given some instruction at top. You've been diagnosed with localized prostate cancer and have been asked to consider some minimally invasive treatment options with different risk-benefit profiles. Notice it's not specific to HIFU. And then the patient's asked, what treatment device would you choose, A or B? So the attributes are a favorable biopsy, the chance of getting a favorable biopsy result after treatment. This is the endpoint for ablation in addition to PSA changes and prostate volume changes that we received in the review of the HIFU devices. Next is the chance of new or worse erectile dysfunction or new or worse urinary incontinence. These, again, were quite prevalent. They were the most prevalent adverse events that we reviewed for these devices, and erectile dysfunction and urinary incontinence remain prevalent concerns for patients regardless of the modality of treatment for their prostate cancer. And you can see there for device A, it has a lower chance of a favorable biopsy result, but it also has a more favorable adverse event profile than device B. And so patients would be asked to choose which of these alternatives they prefer. We would then change this a little bit by changing some of the numbers in either columns, changing the benefit and the risk, and we would do this 9 or 10 times over the course of about 20 minutes. And from that, we can assess what the maximum acceptable risk patients would have for erectile dysfunction or urinary incontinence for these minimally invasive therapies for a given minimal acceptable benefit, some percent of a favorable or negative biopsy after treatment. So our current progress is we've designed the instrument, we validate it, we're conducting the administration of the survey via email. We've currently got about 36, if not more, patients at this point. And we haven't analyzed those data just quite yet. We don't want to look at the data this early. But the regulatory impact for us and other stakeholders is to increase the use of PPI as evidence in our decision making. And most importantly, probably, is that PPI feedback to sponsors and other stakeholders, we hope, will facilitate and hasten improved device design and clinical trial protocol design. But there have been challenges. Patient recruitment takes a large amount of time and effort. We're identifying a fairly specific group of patients, localized untreated 6 and 7s. Physician and clinician buy-in is certainly needed, and certainly patient buy-in is needed. It's probably not a surprise that men aren't racing to talk about their erectile dysfunction or stress or urinary incontinence for a $25 gift card at this point. But we look to increase our recruitment. We're looking to actually move to patient support groups to sort of broaden the poolability of our results to the general population at hand. We're always looking for other recruitment centers, and we hope to return in the near future and discuss our findings. I'd like to thank my colleagues throughout the FDA, and I'd like to thank you for your attention today.